Hello everyone. Now I know that you've all got concerns about the GCSE grading process, and we want everyone to know what we've got planned for between now and mid-June. So the aim of this short video is to let you know as much as possible about the grading process. Let's start with what we know at this point. There are going to be no formal nationwide GCSE exams this year, and schools, they have the flexibility to decide how best to assess their students. So the school will suggest a grade for students in each subject based on what students have been taught. There is no requirement to cover all the content you would have had to if you've been sitting full GCSE exams, but it has to be a pretty broad range. Can't just be like one small aspect of a course. So all of this sort of makes you lucky, really, because for any assessments you students do in class, teachers can be absolutely prepared to answer the questions specific to that assessment. Whereas in a normal year, you have to get taught everything because the questions could be on anything. What we will have to have is robust internal and external quality assurance to make sure that the grades that we're suggesting for you are correct. And it is really important to remember that the grades you are going to get, as they would be in a normal year, are grades from the exam board. It's just that this year, schools will have more direct input into them than they would have had in normal years. So, how is Priory choosing to follow that guidance? Well, the first point to make here is actually we're doing the same sort of thing as other local schools. Talked to lots of them. I know they're all doing the same sorts of things and taking the same sort of approach. So the same as them, we have to decide on an appropriate evidence base for you, and this will become your portfolio of evidence, we're going to call it, in each subject. Standardising purposes, that means sort of making sure that we've got a consistent understanding of what those grades actually represent across all our teaching staff. That has to be the same evidence for every student taking the subject, so we can make direct comparisons between one student's achievements and another. So in theory, that can be worked from since the GCSE course started way back in September 2019. But in practice, of course, because your Year 10 mocks were cancelled and then the Year 11 mocks in January were then cancelled, most subjects will aim to gather consistent evidence by holding in-class assessment sessions across the next few weeks. That's not necessarily the same for every subject. Art and PE, for example, they have records of achievement in practical work going back into Year 10, and they'll use those as at least part of their evidence. But basically, there are going to be lots of mini tests coming up in class to be sat in controlled conditions, so like mini exams. If you are entitled to access arrangements such as extra time or a laptop will do all we possibly can to make sure that those arrangements are met. It is really, really important that you know when those assessments are going to take place. And our website now has a section dedicated to GCSE grading, so please refer to that if you've got queries or you're not sure of anything. I know parents will be watching this video as well. That's particularly aimed at parents. Please use this GCSE grading section of the website as your first port of call. Of course, students should ask teachers for clarification on anything to do with grading, and me too when you see me in school. There is in there an assessment map which shows when all the assessments are being delivered. It's set out day by day down the rows, down the left-hand side, and subjects and class and teacher in the columns at the top there. It will be updated every Friday. Please check this carefully and check it regularly. So it's a dynamic document. Things might change on here. But as you can see, we've started populating it quite heavily already. You'll see when you scroll down, I can't do that because it's a screen, but you'll see that the last date for assessments is Thursday the 20th of May. So let's look at some dates now. The last date for schools to be able to submit grades to exam boards is scheduled to be June the 18th, but we're going to need a week to finish that. So the last date for assessments in class will be Thursday the 20th of May. We've got an inset day coming up on the 21st of May to help us as teachers with that process, and that's a really important part of the grading process. And we use that standardized marking and standardizing to make sure that the grades are also broadly in line with achievements in previous years. So I've got to do that over half-term week. I sit down with all the grades and make sure that I sort of map, I suppose, effectively against what we achieve in 2019. They can't be too wildly above, too wildly below previous year's achievements. Then I'm going to need a week to work through my findings with subject teams. So we'll do that when we get back after half term. So that's the week beginning the 7th of June. And then we submit the grades week beginning the 14th of June. We won't be leaving it until the last day to submit grades, just in case of any issues that crop up. So timescales quite tight. Please remember that at no point during this process is your teacher allowed to tell you what your final grade will be. So please don't ask them. They can tell you though, and you'll probably start to be aware when you get your results back from assessments, what broad area your grade might be in, so that your eventual grade from the exam board in the summer is not going to be too much of a surprise, at least. So, okay, so you're asking the question, what can I do as a student to make sure that this all works for me? I suppose, really, main thing, trust the process. We are getting you ready, and that's the key phrase, I think, with this, getting you ready for in-class assessments that will allow you to show exactly how much you know. We aren't going to be trying to trick you, because we want you to do as well as you possibly can, just as much as you do want yourselves to do as best you possibly can. So please listen to advice and information from your teachers. Be here is really, really important. I know sometimes you are absent, but absence is going to make things trickier for you. You're going to be missing either an assessment or a key piece of information leading up to an assessment. Know what your schedule looks like, your own personal schedule. You know what classes you're in, obviously, so make yourself up a personal plan from the assessments map. And then, based around your schedule, plan your work at home, revision, whatever you want to call it, around that schedule. It says keep quiet there at the bottom. One thing to be aware of is that your class might not sit an assessment in class at the same time as another one in that subject. To give you an example, my Latin class isn't taught at the same time as Mr. Holt's, so we can't sit the assessment at the same time. So one set of students, one class, might then demand to know from the other what the questions were. Well, to do that would be exam malpractice. So in theory, we might have to look at disqualifying you from one subject or more if we get wind of that sort of thing happening. And also, if you think about it, it's a bit stupid, really, to give the answers away to somebody else. Because then they might have a slight advantage over you and get a better grade, even though they don't deserve it. And that would probably rankle you for like ever. So protect yourself and resist the temptation to share what you know about assessments. So, safety nets. What happens if I do really badly in the class assessments or I'm absent? Good question. I'm not going to lie to you. In most subjects, these assessments are going to be the main evidence we'll use in working out your grades. Not all subjects, but most subjects. So if you are absent from an assessment, obviously we want to make sure that you get every opportunity, so we'll offer you a catch-up session. If you do really badly, this bit's a bit tricky. Our aim is to look at all the grades from the assessments and compare them to what we thought you were going to get. So your latest report that you've just had is one good indicator for that. But remember, in that report, it suggests where you were in February, not exactly where you would be in May. If you're wildly out from our notional grade, then we'll have a look to see what else we can draw on from what you've done as a sort of appendix, an extra section to your portfolio. But to be honest, that's going to be a time-consuming process. So we'll only be able to do that in a few severe cases. And to be honest, it's going to mean that if you've got a 2 from your assessments, say, any sort of extra submission in an appendix is likely only to boost you to, say, a 3 rather than, an 8. So in short, it's important that you do as well as you possibly can in the assessment. If anything does go wrong, you don't get the grades that you think you should be getting, you'll be able to appeal. But of course, remember, we've already pointed you towards the grades that the grade areas that you're likely to be getting in August. But we will accept appeals, and you are also able to resit. I'm not quite sure what resit means because you're not exactly sitting now, but anyway, there will be exams for you, a full suite of GCSE exams in the autumn should you want to take up that opportunity. But I think we really want to avoid those scenarios if at all possible, not least because you will now be at college rather than being at primary school. Another good question, what will happen after the 21st of May? You'll probably be saying, well, what's the point of me being at school until the 18th of June if I'm not completing any work that counts towards my GCSE grades? It is a good question. We don't know the answer to that yet, I'm afraid. That is something that's being explored nationally, how schools are going to work that. Also across the county, they're doing that, and of course we're doing that here at Priory, thinking about it, what our plans might be. Once we've got a plan for that, we'll let you know. But to be honest, at the minute, we're just a bit more focused on dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's for the grading process. So there we are. We're under no illusions about this. It's a lot of work for everyone, staff and students, because, but I think, so to go back to what I said earlier, I think for students, the process is actually going to be less stressful than a normal set of GCSE exams would be, because essentially the content of those exams has been reduced and you know what you're going to get questions on. We as teachers have a huge workload ahead of us. We're absolutely prepared to take on that workload because we're completely committed to keep giving each and every one of you the best possible opportunities to show off your talents. So good luck, everyone, and please head to the website if you've got further questions or ask me, preferably in person rather than in an email. So take care and get prepared. This has been Mr. Ashworth on the 15th of March. Thank you.